Hello, Brian. Thank you so much for joining. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for talking with me today.
Brian, I was very happy to see your resume. Looks like you have a lot of Salesforce experience. We're looking for a Salesforce developer. But before I jump into the questions, I would love to hear about you from your own words. Can you tell me about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I've been professionally programming now for almost 10 years, maybe 9 years. And I've worked for a large company and a small company. So I haven't moved around a whole lot in between companies. But I got my computer science degree, and I've started out as a Java developer. And I've been programming ever since. Slowly got into Salesforce, kind of eased out of Java into Salesforce, and I've been working in the Salesforce space ever since.
Cool. So you were mainly a Java developer and you became a Salesforce developer how many years ago?
So I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem, maybe let's say 3 years of more dedicated focus on Salesforce. There was a time where I was kind of splitting myself between multiple applications, so I wasn't strictly on Salesforce. So it's still, somewhat new to me. It's such a huge ecosystem that I still feel lost, at times. So still learning, and it's going well. I'm enjoying it.
Oh yeah? Why are you enjoying it?
I think there's a good community around it. And I kind of also think it's nice in a lot of respects to have that training available, and also these tools that are, laid out for you. So Salesforce has an ecosystem where there's the database, layer that they provide, and there's the Visualforce, and also the Lightning Web Components. And those are kind of all chosen for you and mapped out. Whereas if I was starting a project in another language, there'd be a lot more boilerplate and overhead and researching how to do things and what products to use, and that's mapped out for you here. So I think kind of having a clear roadmap along with the training resources makes it easy to get going and keep on advancing in your career.
Cool. So you like the simplicity of it, that it's all in one language? You don't have to try to learn a couple of different technologies to do one thing?
I wouldn't say. You're still using, Apex and JavaScript.
I know, but it's all within Salesforce though, like as in with
Right. Yeah, so it is all in Salesforce, and you're, working with the tools on that platform. So it does simplify things, I think, and that can be nice. Although, my free time, I still enjoy looking into other things. Salesforce is just, encompasses a very small part of software development, and there's a whole, bigger world out there. And those things are also interesting, and you can learn a lot from experiences with other technologies and apply them to Salesforce, or in some cases maybe they aren't applicable, but it still makes you a stronger developer overall.
What are the other technologies that you say you spend your free time on?
I like to read about various topics, or listen to podcasts or screencasts, and just kind of have a general idea of what's going on out there, what is the state of things, and then if you need a tool, you can deep dive into something. But it seems like, there's new stuff popping up all the time, but you just make yourself stronger by learning about these other topics, whether that be another platform like AWS or Google Cloud or Azure, or another language. Different languages kind of shepherd you into doing things in certain ways, and you can learn a lot, based on these other methods of doing things. And I think it really helps people grow as developers. And there's of course lately a lot of exciting stuff around machine learning and big data and everything. So it's all. I just think it's all interesting to
Cool.
keep up with what's happening.
Cool. So you have about 3 years of Salesforce experience out of your 10 years of programming experience. What has been the most interesting project that you have worked on?
I think one of my favorite ones to work on was actually integrated with Salesforce. It was in a kind of before, or maybe at the very beginning, when a lot of companies were still on Visualforce. So the company I was at that time hadn't adopted, I think it was Aura framework at that time from Salesforce. So I was building out a Google Maps, integration inside of Salesforce. And that was using a JavaScript framework called EXTJS, which was popular at that time. And that was just really, really cool, kind of integrating, a lot of the functionality from Salesforce inside of, Google Maps. So it was kind of like the Map Anything or GeoPoint products, little simpler than that, but if you're familiar with those. So it was, I thought it was really interesting to kind of take that Salesforce data and look at it in visualize it on a map, look at a spatial representation of where your customers are all at and interact with it on, a map.
So this was an app for your sales reps so that they can map out their customers and then to go meet them and see an efficient way to set up their meetings for the day? Was it something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. I worked on a similar project for waste management for their sales team. Interesting, but we were using not Google Maps, Leaf.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And was the sales team happy about it?
Yeah, they really liked it. They kept evolving, and that was largely, my project there. So I knew all the ins and outs of it. So, kind of in charge of the whole thing. And at that time, I think, you still had to upload your static, your JavaScript as a static resource to Salesforce, and EXTJS was pretty complicated framework. So I kind of set up a cool development environment where Salesforce would pull that data from my local machine, and I could just work, real time inside of Salesforce. Just compile the code and it's there without having to go through uploading static resources and everything. So
cool.
Kind of a cool workflow that I set up.
Why was this your favorite project? Was it because you were in full control of it and you could create it the way you thought it was right for the users, or because of the technologies used, you like the integration of Google and JavaScript and Salesforce?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of those things. For sure it was interesting, just kind of, from a learning perspective, using this other JavaScript framework inside of Salesforce was something new for me. And I found that kind of enjoyable to work through the challenges there, as well as being, a greenfield project. So this was something new. So yeah, you could, I did have control over the design, and so it was kind of fun to architect that and see the users enjoy it.
Cool. Are there any things you don't like about the Salesforce platform?
Yes. I think by that same kind of the same thing that I like is also something that I dislike sometimes. So it does simplify you. It does give you a path of use this technology, this combination of technologies that you're forced to use if you're developing on their platform. But sometimes maybe that's not the right tool, or sometimes there might be a better way to do something. And Salesforce might eventually, if they see a lot of adoption of a certain tool or, way of doing something out in the larger developer community, then they'll adopt that, but it'll take a while. So sometimes you have to wait on things, to become available as a Salesforce developer. So, some things I can think of as an example are the stuff around like the recent Salesforce DX. They gave us a lot of new tools, command line tools, and made deployments easier. And, I think that was a big step forward. Before, I think it was, there was definitely a little more pain in managing your development environment and just getting your code deployed. And, I think that was simplified just by them adding that, a command line. Well, I guess they had a command line tool before, but they streamlined some things. And I just feel like, it was difficult to work with in some respects before, and they introduced that tool, and it became easier. But there's a lot of other, there's probably countless things that have been, introduced over the years or improved that kind of coming in to, if you had come into this from another language, you'd be like, wow, this is difficult to do. And, and there's also, if you just take a software developer from, a Java developer, let's say, and throw them into Salesforce, it's kind of complicated, very complicated at first, because there's a lot of, where do I go to find this and where do I go to find that? You're not just, living in your IDE coding. There's a lot of configuration stuff that you have to, get over the learning curve on, and that can make things difficult as well. But after once I got used to that, I was okay with that as well.
What are the Salesforce best practices that you abide by when you code?
The best practices. Let's see. Bulkification. So, I guess around that same topic, taking governor limits into consideration is, I guess, the larger theme there. Is something that you always have to think about on Salesforce that maybe you don't have to think about on other platforms to that degree. So bulkification. Let's see, and with, I guess, in just generally, you have the, like with architecture, maybe not just, this isn't just coding, but, you have data skew, is always something to look out for. Let's see, what else? Unit testing. So as you're going along, you need to verify you need to verify that what you're writing is correct. Those are the biggest ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head here. If you have a specific one in mind, maybe I can answer.
You got the key ones, yeah. Respecting the governor limits by having bulkification of the code, having good unit tests, using the system asserts, and then there's one I thought you would mention is, maybe you would mention it eventually though, is putting the logic in the Apex class, not in the trigger.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that as well.
My next question is, when do you use trigger dot before versus trigger dot after?
So you would want to use before if you have something that you want to do before the data is committed to or saved to the database. And then after would be after the changes have been saved. So you would want to do before, generally when you're updating, some field, rather than after. If you did an update after the fact, you would end up having to make another call or another DML statement, update or insert or whatever there may be. So you'll eat up some of your limits there and slow things down. I think that's that's the way I think about it, is generally I want to do my updates before the save. Otherwise you're doing redundant, work that's not very efficient if you're doing it afterwards.
If I want to create an account record and then the child record, every time, like if I want to create an account record and the child, like account contact, for every new account I want to automatically create a contact. And do I put this logic in the before or after?
Well, you need the ID, so you won't have the ID until the record has been inserted. So in that case, you'll have to get the ID after the fact. Okay,
yeah, I agree. When do you use a wrapper class?
A wrapper class? Oh man, there's a lot of times you could use a wrapper class. Of course, one of the, I think, most common examples would be with Visualforce. So you have some, I guess, be the model, the data model that you want to display on the page, and you may have to wrap a record along with some other data in order to display what you want out on the Visualforce page. So that's the main time I would have a wrapper, at least that comes to mind for me.
What about outside of Visualforce pages? Do you use wrapper classes or not really?
Pressing me for a specific example. Let's see. Definitely do. But I think most of the times when I would use a wrapper, it's because I need, some extra functionality added to that S object that Salesforce has.
Okay, cool. And okay, last one is not a technical question, just a more behavioral. What do you do when you disagree with the technical approach of the lead developer?
Well, I would talk it over. Lead developers can have, miss something easily. Everybody makes mistakes, or, you don't take something into consideration. So I think it's important to at least raise the issue and give your point of view. They can give their point of view. Ultimately, I think that'll be up to the team lead. But it's good to share what you know with with anyone on your team, really. If you have some disagreement in how a problem might be solved, because they could have just overlooked it, or maybe there's a little more to it than what you realize. So it could be helping, or you might end up learning something.
Cool. And after you share your thoughts and you explain yourself, what if the lead developer still maintains the approach that you don't agree with?
Well, in that case, I would go along with their approach.
Yeah. Have you ever had situations like that happen? Or it's usually you can convince?
I've not really had something like that happen. I think normally, if you come to maybe if you came to somebody in a forceful kind of way that's not very nice, and told them you're wrong and I'm right, then you might lock them into their decision even more. But I think if you talk it over, most people are going to choose what's the best way, and that's kind of the purpose of you going to them, is you think maybe there is a better way, and you talk it over, and if there is, hopefully that's the one you both will agree to end up going forward with.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. I also I would have a hard time coming up with an example where there was a had to follow an approach that I don't agree with. I think it's a lot of times just I think developers in general are very logical people, and it's as long as you can explain the logic, they're open to different approaches. Do you have any questions for me, Brian?
I do not.
All right. Would you be able to provide would you be able to email me a sample of the code you worked on recently? It could be Apex or Lightning Web Component, something that's non-confidential, maybe you did on your free time.
Not in Apex or Lightning.
Okay. In what language is it?
I could probably dig up some old Python. Or okay. I have who knows, I may have some other things too from back in the past. I don't have anything on my GitHub. I kind of tend to do little throwaway things that I don't bother uploading. So if I can find something, then I'll send you. I don't have a side project going at the moment, though.
All right, send it over. We'll take a look at it.
All right.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.